You may or may not have heard about a new law banning mink farms, circuses and marine mammals, which was announced in France on the 29th of September. Sounds great, right? In principle? Are you not sure? Why does this even matter? If you've seen anything about this popping up on social media, you might have seen some contentious debate alongside it, and for very good reason. Today I'll be picking apart the 3 areas that this ban covers, what it truly means for the animals, and exploring why there is such a backlash against certain parts of it. If that's something that's crossed your mind at all, then keep on watching. Hello and welcome to this episode of Emma's Deep Dives, the channel where I, with your help, change the narrative on what we understand about animal welfare and the impact that it has on our thoughts, feelings and decisions we make every day. For those of you who are new, my name is Emma and I have specialised in animal welfare science, conducted research on bottlenose dolphins and have direct industry experience across marine mammal facilities. Let's start with part 1. Mink farming. So France's 4 remaining mink farms are to be closed within the next 5 years. I think when I say that this is ultimately a very positive outcome for both animal welfare and animal rights, the vast majority of people would tend to agree. As someone who is a supporter of animal welfare and animal welfare science, I must explicitly state that this is different from being someone who is exclusively a supporter of animal rights. I'll go into the differences in much greater detail in another video, as there is a lot of confusion and conflation between the two, but in sum, an advocate of animal welfare wants to know and make sure that the animals we use within human society are being looked after properly and can enjoy the best lives that they can experience within our care or influence. An animal rights advocate believes that humans should have no right over the lives of animals and does not support their use within any aspect of human society. As I was researching this, I learned that mink farming is actually seasonal, so there should be a clear and definitive endpoint to breeding these animals. Out of all the bans, I'm not sure exactly why this is a 5-year deadline, but there will be some sort of economic reason why this hasn't been banned following the end of the current farming season. From a welfare science perspective, mink and foxes are not very well domesticated compared to other animals that are used in food production, and their needs cannot feasibly be met under these farmed conditions to really satisfy anyone working within the animal welfare industry. Hello, sorry for the interruption. I felt it was really important to add this in because there's been some significant developments in the news about mink farming in recent days regarding COVID-19. Firstly, in relation to the France ban, I need to stress that even though France has now outlawed mink farms, which is great, there were only 4 remaining in the country anyway, which is just a drop in the bucket compared to other major world exporters of fur like Denmark, which has about 1,000 fur farms. I've linked to some news articles below, but basically Denmark is now culling 17 million animals because COVID has infected some of these mink and it's now mutated into a different strain of coronavirus. Mink are very susceptible to respiratory diseases, and what has happened is that COVID's now spread from human to mink, and then from mink to mink, and this mutated strain has jumped back into humans, which is incredibly dangerous as it could further jeopardize public health and the efficacy of vaccines, hence why they're now carrying out this widespread culling. Putting so many animals under such a chronically stressful environment, such as intensive farming, it lowers their immune function, making them incredibly susceptible to catching and spreading disease, which is how this whole pandemic started in the first place. Really, this is an issue that needs addressing globally. I mean, what an absolute waste of life for those poor animals. You know, they've been bred for a rather meaningless purpose anyway, and now they have absolutely zero value in death. So not is this only now a major public health concern, it's also just really sad, and I hope it makes us raise those questions over the sustainability of this particular industry, not just from a welfare perspective, an ethical perspective, but from a public health and safety one as well. I realise this digresses somewhat from the France ban, but I felt this particular issue was actually more relevant given the current circumstances than what I'd initially planned to say about my general thoughts on wearing fur and the fur industry. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. So, part 2. Travelling circuses involving wild animals are to be closed and phased out indefinitely. Out of all the research I did, this was the most shocking to me, and there really wasn't much information online about the circus industry in general, But I did find a particular French website called Circuses, which had links to the most recent French legislation on the regulation of circus animals from 2011. And that included their care and their transport. Again, I've linked to that below. The legislation I was reading was incredibly basic, like very basic in terms of welfare standards. But the thing that made me wince the most was really the lack of regulation on training. And if this isn't regulated properly, even with expected industry standards, this is where it has the potential to get the most cruel. There aren't concise numbers on exactly how many circuses there are in France, but estimates are between 80 to 158, and the number of animals kept ranges between 230 and 500 animals, including elephants, big cats, zebras, horses, hippos, camels, giraffes, bears, reptiles, and birds, and I'm sure there are many others as well. For the animals themselves, many would have been bred in captivity, but it's unknown if any or maybe how many have been taken from the wild. But rehoming such animals takes considerable effort and a lot of financial resources. But as part of this ban, the French government is actually offering 8 million euros to remodel businesses and to help provide retraining to the animal trainers. I've got no idea if there are enough facilities or high quality sanctuaries that can support that number of exotic animals without at some point severely compromising some of their welfare along the line, which I guess they've already compromised welfare. Anyway, I'm sure as with any industry, there are exceptions and possibly instances of higher welfare, but ultimately it's the principle of using animals in circus acts that I fundamentally disagree with. Given that the sole purpose is showmanship and entertainment, with no real valuable educational component or contribution to species conservation or research, it really doesn't feel like a loss to me from an animal welfare perspective. If we wish to display animals, then they're far better housed in accredited zoos where qualified and dedicated professionals can actually tend to their needs and ensure that they can thrive, where the main focus is on the animals, not the performance art. I plan to make a separate video covering this and what the differences are between circuses and zoos, because often they're very much lumped together in the same thing, and they're just absolutely not. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, let me know down in the comments. All right, so we plowed through quite a lot in that second bit. If you're still with me and you are enjoying the video so far, hit the like button as it will really help me learn from all of your feedback. So part number 3 of this France ban is the ending of marine mammal breeding and imports with immediate effect, and removing and rehousing the animals within the next 7 to 10 years. The next area is a very complicated topic and at times very controversial. And many of you may disagree with me, and I understand why, because I started out with the exact same thinking and feeling behind it. With marine mammals in captivity, there is a very careful balance to strike when it comes to making decisions for their welfare. Like with any animal really, but particularly for marine mammals. Now, I have personal experience in a variety of marine mammal facilities, and my perception of them has really changed and evolved with every single one that I've been a part of. When a marine mammal facility is done right, and the welfare standards are priority number 1 and they're really top notch, the animals really can thrive. Now, I know that may seem hard to believe when you see them in tanks, and I truly felt the same way initially, but when you gain a deeper understanding of the care, the training, the science behind everything that they do day in, day out, behind the scenes, it completely changes your perspective, and it's really changed mine. I still have questions, and that's really what I'd like to use this platform for, to dive deeper into as well, so I can share with you how and why my perspectives have changed. So for that reason, I have some real difficulties with this France ban on marine mammals, and there is justifiable backlash within the industry. From an animal welfare standpoint, there's several, but there's 3 significant issues with this. There's actually 3 marine mammal facilities still remaining in France. One of them, Parc Asterix in Paris, is one of the leading facilities worldwide developing animal welfare science for dolphins. It's quite ironic, really. So ending marine mammal captivity in France will prevent scientists from learning and developing how we can continue to improve dolphin care in facilities around the world. I found this really quite crushing, and I know people who will be personally affected by it. Secondly, the family Delphinidae, so that covers orcas, bottlenose dolphins, beluga whales, amongst the 37 different species within them, are inherently comprised of social animals. So reproduction and the opportunity to raise babies is an essential component to these species' welfare. Whether that's raising their own calf or learning skills into how to raise them by helping others in their group, denying this opportunity is an incredibly harsh decision to impose on these animals who now have to live the rest of their lives in a barren state or to be exposed to potentially quite dangerous long-term contraception. So I started out believing that breeding bans were a really great thing, but as I've learned more about welfare science and about marine mammals in general, my mind really has changed. So the next reason this is such a problem, and it's an incredibly heated debate in this field, is the concept of sea pens or sanctuaries. Now, you hear this term being thrown around a lot, and that aquariums must retire their animals to sea pens to live out the rest of their days in a bigger, much more natural habitat. Now, what I'm about to say may make some of you very upset, but in short, these places simply don't exist. They just don't. Geographically, economically, ethically, at present, logistically, they are simply a fantasy. And unless there is significant investment and an ironclad financial plan that can guarantee the care of these animals for the next 30 plus years, the lack of this alone is enough to cripple this concept, let alone finding enough suitable locations around the world to house the number of animals that are being pressured to even be released. And you bet I'm going to make another video about this because there is so much to say. Even if they spent the 8 million euros on just investing in sea pens alone, is barely enough to scratch the surface of what is required to undertake such a task. And it's not because the idea and the concept wouldn't necessarily be popular or welcomed by the zoo community. It's just because at the moment, the risks to compromising animal welfare are so astronomically high. Absolutely nobody is willing to risk placing their animals in that environment because it is almost guaranteed to fail. There is something else to say about this, but I'll say that in another video. So yes, the France ban is definitely a mixed bag for animal welfare, and I think we can all learn really to live without real fur and can appreciate circus performances as a human art form without animals, but it is a crushing blow for the marine mammal industry and the scientific community. If you're wanting to learn more about the topics covered in this video in greater detail, then click that subscribe button and that little grey notification bell and you'll be the first in line to watch the next Emma's Deep Dives. Bye.